During this installment of our video training series, we will look at some ways to remove door hinges. We will point out some hazards to watch for when spreading and cutting hinges. In many of our techniques, you will notice that we cut door hinges. Before cutting the hinges with your cutter, contact the tool manufacturer to find out if this is recommended. By following the techniques outlined in this video, you'll be less likely to damage your rescue equipment. All Genesis cutters are designed to cut hinges. Remember to wrap the blades completely around the hinge when cutting.
Okay, now as far as hinges go, on this one we spread the top hinge. And whether we do the top hinge first or the bottom hinge first, to me is determined by the wreck. If the top hinge is wide open when I get there, then I'm going to go to the top hinge first. If the bottom hinge is open, then I'm going to go to it. All I have to do is remember what's going to happen to the door depending on which hinge I spread. If I spread this one first, I force the door down. Then when I go to the bottom hinge, I lift the door up. If I do it just the opposite happens. I've got my webbing on here with the firefighter holding it over there, so he's going to control that door for me regardless of which hinge I do first. A couple things I try to do with my spreader is I try to set it right on top of the hinge. For one thing, that takes all the weight of the spreader out of my arms, and I use that as a shelf, and I do my first spread there. If I can't get on top of the hinge, then I go to the underneath side of the hinge. Last resort for me is to go into the center of the hinge. The reason for that is I've got a center pin on each side of the hinge, and a lot of times when your spreader gets in there, you get all the force of the spreader going on those two pins, and it'll want to start riding out on you, start kicking out. So that's my last option. The bolt heads, another point where we got to be careful because those are usually hardened steel, and that's a very hard place for a spreader to move. When we decide we're going to cut a hinge, which if you have the option to cut a hinge, that's great, because now I don't have any energy throwing my door away. All I do is I come in, I make my two cuts, and the door just drops to the ground. But again, I have to stay off the center pins. Very strong points. There's no reason for me to put my cutter tips right on top of those pins. I come to the center and I cut the weakest part of the hinge out. And that usually works pretty well for you. If you cut the top hinge first, I can force the door down, which exposes the bottom hinge to where I can get my cutter tips in. So you got a couple different options open to you as far as hinges go.
Thank you for watching this video presentation from American Rescue Technology.